Hi YouTube, Regina here. So, today's topic. Today I wanted to talk to you about avoiding debt traps. On this channel, I've spoken to you before about running your finances as though you were running a business. And I think this is an important way to run finances because at the end of the day, you're responsible for your own financial choices. And so run your finances with CEO level oversight and discipline. It's going to help you build wealth. And if you were a business, you would carefully scrutinize every debt expense before you made it because you'd have to if you want to be successful. And so it's about making sure that your financial choices align with your goals. It's about making sure that your borrowing is working for you and not against you. And so let's go through some of these debt traps so that you can learn to avoid them. The first one we spoke about the other day, and that is the buy now, pay later schemes. This is really the no interest, no problem, but not so fast. You want to be really careful when you see the option to buy anything with 0% finances or any kind of payment plan that spreads out your payment over time. These are traps. These lead to overspending and it gives you the illusion that you're getting free money. But in reality, the items that are with these buy now, pay later are not discounted. You're paying the full markup price on these items because reality is the merchant ends up having to pay anywhere from 2 to 8%. And if you think they're covering that cost, you're wrong. That cost is passed on to the consumer. And so when you see a plan to spread out payments, know that you're paying for it. And instead, opt to do something different. Opt to save up for the cash, or even opt to just do one credit payment. Don't open up a credit plan to make a payment. Instead, if you need to use your credit card, use your credit card, but pay it off in full. Otherwise, you can't afford it. So that's number one debt trap. Number two is avoid lifestyle inflation. This is a really big one because what ends up happening is as people incomes rises, they think they can afford more than they can. And debt really does trap the individual. In one of my comments section the other day, someone mentioned that they got their severance package when they were laid off and they were earning a good income, but their boss started to cry. And the reason why is their boss was trapped. Even though they were earning close to $500,000 a year with their total benefits package, they felt heavy burden of debt and they were scared of losing their own job. And so the idea of laying someone else off when they understood how much debt was trapping them, this falls into lifestyle inflation. Back in the day, back in the 80s, when I was a kid and I was growing up, homes were much smaller. Now, I grew up in a very decent sized home, but we were a family of 14. So it made sense to have a home that had plenty of bedrooms, but it had 1.5 bathrooms, and we were able to survive. Back then, the average home size was about 1,740 square feet, back in the 80s, I believe. And that was 630 square feet per person, with the average home size having 2.75 adults. I always find it funny when they give you these fractions. But today it's vastly different. You have less people living in the home. Now they're averaging 2.5, but the home size has grown dramatically. And so now the individual per person square footage has anywhere from 920 to 1,000 square feet per person in the home. That's a lot. That's lifestyle inflation for you, hitting you front and center. And so when you're thinking about buying a home, home prices is one of the biggest things. Car loans can really eat up your opportunity to build wealth. Today, the average car loan, I think, is $700 a month, a little over $700 a month. And the average interest rate is 6.61, I believe. Let me just look at that. I have the notes in front of me. So the The average car loan is 6.61, but the term has increased. So that's for a new car. For a used car, the average loan is $550 a month with the average interest rate of 11.74%. That's really high. I mean, imagine dividing that into the law of 72. Yeah, talking about having money working against you. And so the average loan term now is 68.2 months. That's a really big difference from the 4 to 5 year loans that used to be back in the day when I used to take loans. As for monthly mortgage payments, the 30-year fixed rate is um, monthly payment average is 27.15, and the 15-year loan is 35.52. And as far as interest rates are concerned, as of February 6th, the 30-year fixed rate interest rate was 6.89%. So really consider interest rates are kind of high. It's a debt trap if you're buying too much home, if you're buying too much space. And so try to avoid as best as you can to keep things for longer. Stay in your starter home, put more of a down payment down. Try to avoid these lifestyle inflation because just because your income rises doesn't mean that your expenses should. You try to have to maintain financial consistency as long as you can, including staying in a starter home sometimes. Resist the urge to make unnecessary upgrades because that is taking away your opportunity to build wealth and to focus on your long-term goals. That's a big debt trap. The next thing is credit cards. Credit cards are a tool, not a crutch. And people today rely on credit cards for everything. In reality, when you're using a credit card, you're taking a loan from a bank. And so whether you know it or not, that's what you're doing. And so if you are using your credit card, make sure that you're using debt only for committed and controlled intentional expenses. So you want to make sure that there are things that are beneficial for you that are going to truly help you and not hurt you. And that would be things like putting bills on and then paying it off monthly because then you're going to get the points on it. Consider if you're going to be buying an item, try to go the cash route because reality is merchants pay banks to be able to accept credit cards, and that fee can be anywhere from 2 to 8%. And those costs are being passed on to the consumer more and more, particularly when it comes to restaurants. They'll have to show you two forms of bills, one for the cash discount and one for if you're going to pay the credit card. They're going to pass that processing fee on to you. More states are starting to do that because, hey, people are willing to pay for it. So that's what's happening. So don't use credit cards as a crutch. Use it as a tool. And if you can, even ask around to see if you can get a discount if you pay things in full using cash. Because they're not going to be paying the merchant, they may be able to give you the discount instead. And the prices that you're being charged, sometimes it's built into those too. It's built into the cost of the goods that you're being sold. So you could potentially get a discount by offering to pay cash. So the next thing is life happens. And you have to be prepared for it sometimes. So an emergency fund should be your first line of defense. And a lot of people struggle with this one because the reality is that they've already accumulated so much debt and they're not able to figure out ways to save money. But you have to try. And so I always say start from where you are and even if it comes to just paying one bill extra a month. So pick a bill to pay extra on a month if you haven't figured out a way to keep that cash in your wallet or to keep that cash in the bank. Pay extra on a bill. So this way you have a slightly built emergency fund if you're not able to, but a well-funded emergency fund can actually help you from stopping running to credit cards. Because the reality is if you don't have an emergency fund built for yourself, then you're going to have no choice but to run to the card, pull out your wallet, and use an emergency fund. Use your credit card as an emergency fund to pay for your bills. That's really a debt trap. And so, because at the end of the day, credit cards come with extremely high interest rates. So, it's really going to depend on your credit score, on what the interest rates you get. But in general, interest rates are high for all consumers because the prime rate's pretty high right now. And so, really only use your credit cards as a tool, not as a crutch. And as soon as you can move away from using it as a crutch, the better off you will be. So, try to build an emergency fund. Number 5, avoid the minimum payment trap, because it is a trap. At the end of the day, what ends up happening is people end up making purchases and then they resort to just paying the minimum. So they look at the minimum payment and they keep themselves on this perpetual cycle of just making minimum payments. But as interest rates continue to rise, what ends up happening is the repayments over time continues to rise with it. And debt itself starts to skyrocket because if you're spending money and you're not paying down the debt itself can get out of control. So you really want to avoid that because it's a trap. So don't spend money that you don't have. If you're not able to pay your card off in full every month, that means you really can't afford to spend on things like wants. And you'll have to be really careful with your needs as well, even if it comes to putting your needs on a credit card. You have to be careful with every dollar. If you're at that point where you are simply paying the minimum and not able to get yourself out of the cycle of debt, to try to build a debt payoff strategy if you encounter this. Work extra if you need to. Well, it depends on where you are, but pay off that debt and use a debt payment strategy. You can use an approach where you're either doing the avalanche or you're doing the debt snowball, where the avalanche is where you pay the highest interest rate and the snowball is where you attack the loan with the least amount of money on it so that you can have some quick wins. Or you can do a mix of those two. And sometimes the highest interest rate debt could be the smallest balance, but it rarely is. The next thing you want to do is you want to be really skeptical. And this is with regards to any upselling that is done towards you. And extended warranties, that's an upsell. More legroom on a flight, that's an upsell. Priority boarding, that's an upsell. So you want to try to avoid these things as much as possible, particularly if you don't have an emergency fund. Because at the end of the day, I think fear is one of the things that sells. And so people are sold extended warranties because they worry that, oh, God forbid my dryer doesn't work. Me having the extended warranty could save me money. And at the end of the day, you're really just spending money that you may not have. And instead, what you could do is take that payment and put it towards an emergency fund. So retailers push these plans, and there's a reason why they're pushing those plans because they're making money on it. So consider that. Consider your financial goals instead, and don't fall prey to these upselling tactics because in reality, you have to really evaluate your own needs of what you're looking to do and paying for something just for, maybe if your dryer breaks down, you hang up your clothes instead, and then you avoid buying the next dryer until you can really truly afford it. So really be skeptical about extended warranties, add-on, upsell, things that happen when you're at the checkout and they're trying to sell you something else. And this includes even at like things like the supermarket or on, you know, lines. You'll see items that are right in your eyeline sight. That's an upsell. Try to avoid being, falling into debt by adding things in your cart that you don't need. Next, read the fine print on loans. Really, really read the fine print on loans. And this includes mortgages, this includes car loans, but it's not just those kind of things. At the end of the day, we all can fall into debt traps. So this is even things like timeshares. And thankfully, I read the loan terms, But back in the day, I think it was the early 2000s, my husband and I, we were in Atlantic City, and they were offering us um, vouchers for free dinner. And so I'm like, oh, let's just go. Let's just go to the timeshare presentation. If we go and we sit through it, they were going to give us a voucher for a little bit of gambling and a voucher for a meal. And I thought I wouldn't fall prey to the timeshare, but it really sounded too good to be true. And thankfully it wasn't. I took that loan after we signed the bottom line, and I took that loan into work the next day, and I brought it over to one of the lawyers, and that lawyer helped me get out of it. There was, I think, a 72-hour clause in there that I could actually end the contract, and I just had to follow these certain steps. And thankfully, I have not been paying for a timeshare for these last 20 years. But that would have been a debt trap. So scrutinize your loans. Maybe there's a way you can get out of it if you did sign something. And, I know sometimes even when it comes to flights, when you purchase them, you have 24 hours to even, refund certain things, including, I think it's considered you could avoid the flight if you spend too much money on the seats that you're buying. Look at the interest rate, look at the terms, understand the fees and the repayment structure, because at the end of the day, these things could be debt traps, particularly when it comes to timeshares. Oh, I got so lucky with that one. The next one is resisting the I deserve it mentality, because I really do think this is one of the biggest debt traps. For me, at least, it was. I can't even tell you the number of things I did because I felt I deserved it. I felt I deserved to go to Paris, even though I didn't really have next month's rent. I felt I deserved it. And so at the end of the day, and I've been saying that a lot lately, at the end of the day, I deserve wealth more. And so really remove your emotions from and your feelings from things, because that will make you spend money. Fear sells, happiness sells. Your mood can make you spend money, and it could be a debt trap. And so instead of, worrying on what your wants are and what your impulses tell you want to do, try to instead plan ahead and use your spending for anticipated spending. And so for now what I do is when I want to go on vacation and I want to go someplace nice like Paris, I plan for it and I anticipate that spending. And so I get to enjoy it twice over instead of in the moment of when I'm making the purchase. And so as I'm planning for it and as I'm paying for it, I can then enjoy the countdown to the trip coming up. So really use anticipated um, spending, or it is anticipated spending, to avoid debt traps. Pay for it a little bit at a time, but before your trip, and try to avoid using debt in the moment to go. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're not borrowing for anything that is status related, because status related probably goes to the I deserve it mentality, but you're really worried about what other people may potentially think about you. And this could be things like the luxury cars, your designer watch, handbag, shoes. I mean, the gamut runs to so many things. But instead, focus on spending that money on bringing you wealth. So instead of worrying about things for status and borrowing for status, think about investing for wealth, because assets that bring you cash flow are going to eventually be able to allow you to make lifestyle improvements. And if you are buying anything because you think that someone else will notice, in reality, people are too busy with themselves. They're not noticing what you're buying. And maybe they're going to start to, you know, keep up with you, and that's a cycle you don't want to be in. If they are, it tends to be the people that notice or the people that don't have money. But the people who do have money, it doesn't make an impression on us. So the bottom line is you own your financial choices. And so you want to make sure that every dollar has a purpose and that every debt decision is carefully weighed, because that's the way you avoid debt traps. If there are other debt traps that you want to add to this list, by all means, add them in the comment section and hit like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.